My Life in the War of 1812 by Joshua Crooks and Lucy McLaughlin. Chapter 1. The Two Suitors. It was just another quiet morning in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, for everyone but me. I am used to sleeping and then heading to the diner for breakfast and then stopping by the village for a visit with my friends. But not this morning. I had to wake up early, take a shower, brush my teeth, and do my very rare irregular morning routine. I had to slip on my dress and hurry downstairs, for today I would be meeting two suitors. I curtsied to my court and scurried onto the pavilion to be announced to the crowd and meet the suitors. As soon as I arrived on the pavilion, the horn was blown. The man who had blown the horn cleared his voice and announced, "Hear ye, hear ye. Today Our Lady Vanessa Varacou will be then, on the first Saturday of spring, she will choose whom she wished to take her hand in marriage." First presenting Sir Regulus of England. Coming down the row was the most handsome person, the man of my dreams. Next presenting Thomas Barty, the leader in trade for these colonies and lieutenant in the war. Then came a strong man with a handsome war uniform and a bayonet over his shoulder. They came up the stairwell to greet me and I curtsied. They each took an arm and led me down the stairwell to the crowd. They let go of my arm and they each gave me some flowers and then went into the palace to discuss things about our dates and when they would be taking place. The maid brought out some cakes and tea for our talk about everything. Chapter 2. Tea and Cakes. After the tea and cakes were delivered, we talked. Regulus said, "Lady Vanessa Varacou, I believe my date should be on a Tuesday." We agreed on that, and Tom said, "My lady, I say mine should be on Thursday, should it not?" I agreed that would be lovely. So we spent the rest of our time there talking about many things about the time period. I asked Regulus what he did for a living. I asked the same of Tom. They both had quite interesting lives. After our talk was finished, they both went their separate ways. Regulus to the north, Tom to the east. I couldn't help but notice Regulus duck into an alley. I ducked into the alley, desperate to find out where that sly fox was going. I spied on him for quite a while and finally saw him duck into the cafe. I followed him in but could not see him. I sat down wondering where my torrid lover had gone. After many long moments I spotted him talking to a cloaked figure. I moved forward to get a good look at who he was talking to. I was able to slip in the table next to them in time to see Regulus slip the figure a sack of gold and say, "Make sure nothing goes right." Then they got up and left. After that I got up and walked out of the cafe with the strange feeling I was being watched. Chapter 3. The Mysterious Monday. The next day I woke up at the crack of dawn. I walked very sleepily to the cafe, still confused about what had happened the night before. When I walked in, my usual waitress took me to my usual table for breakfast. When I sat down I ordered her usual breakfast. I suddenly had the same feeling I had the night before. I was being watched and I knew it. I rotated my head to see if anyone was watching me, but no, nobody. Soon my food came out and I ate. I kept wondering what Regulus was doing there. However, my delicious breakfast made me forget these thoughts, until after I was finished with my usual breakfast I saw Regulus scurry by the cafe. I quickly left my seat in the restaurant and followed him. I saw him walk to a remote part of the docks. When I arrived I saw him with the same figure he was with the night before. The figure spoke and said, "Here she be, matey, so you want me to let her loose Thursday?" Regulus answered, "Correct. Let nobody know of our meeting here." The figure nodded in reply. Then suddenly he threw a knife at me. The figure started to run after me. I screamed and ran. I knew the best bet was to head home. Once I got there I ordered the guards to seal the doors. They did so and I was safe, at least for now. I never spoke with anyone about these encounters. Chapter 4. The First Date. Before I knew it, Tuesday had arrived. My first date was today, and instead of being excited I was worried. I thought of what I had seen the past couple of days with Regulus. Then I remembered an event. The day I had first met him. He had seemed nice then, but now a bit intimidating. That day I found out that Regulus fought for England and Tom fought for the colonies. It suddenly struck me. Regulus was using this as an excuse to kill Tom. I also thought he might have to get rid of me. So I got even more worried about my date. I thought that this may be the last time I would see this room. I decided to consider my options. I could go and possibly die, or I could stay home. Sadly, according to my family customs, it would be a very insult to my entire family line. I wouldn't dare do that, so I decided to go to the date. I had a pretty casual morning. I went to the diner for breakfast. I dealt with some of my duties. I went to lunch at the seafood room in my palace. Then I took a well-deserved rest. Once I awoke from my nap, I got ready for the date. I put on my best dress and I went outside. There was a carriage waiting for me. I got in and waiting there was Regulus. I let out a long sigh. Regulus asked me if she was tired. I told him no, and we continued the ride to the restaurant. Once we were there, Regulus helped me out of the carriage and to their table. I wondered what had really happened earlier. It seemed so real. But suddenly Regulus broke my daydream. He took my hands and said, "Remember, some people live front forward, but others live under a mask." I wondered what he meant by that. But there was no time to wonder. Our food came out as soon as she began to ponder the meaning. It was a good but silent meal. But before we were finished, I saw the man I saw on the docks with Regulus. I looked over his shoulder, but when the man noticed, he turned around. Regulus asked me, "What are you looking at?" "Nothing," I said quickly. He turned around and turned back. Then he said, "My lady, I have a quick business matter to attend to." With that he stood up, turned around, and followed the man. I waited for Regulus to go around the corner before she got up and followed him. I went after Regulus and the mysterious man. I went around a corner or two following the men before I came to a secret lair. There the man and Regulus sat at a table. The man handed Regulus a stack of papers. "From King George III. He wants you to eradicate Thomas Barty." "Well, smarty, isn't that why I hired you?" Regulus replied. Then he turned around swiftly and walked back. But I was so lost with what happened I didn't see Regulus walking back. Then Regulus turned a corner and ran right into me, knocking me out of my daydream. "Oh, my lady," Regulus said. "Oh, it was my fault. I went to look for you and there you are," Vanessa replied. Then we sat down and continued our date together. After we were finished, we sat down in the carriage and they went home. When we arrived, Regulus softly kissed me on the hand. Then Regulus saw the man behind Vanessa and he did a quick movement of his hand to shoo him away. I turned to look around. But before that happened, Regulus swung me and kissed me. Then, realizing what happened, turned around, went in my house, and went to bed. As I fell asleep, I thought of the wondrous day ahead. Chapter 5: The Wondrous Wednesday. I woke up in a better mood than I had since this whole business started. I started to become a little less suspicious of Regulus and a little more fond of him. I went down to the cafe and was in a very big hurry. After breakfast, I was going to buy my dress for the date with Tom. When I arrived in the cafe, my usual waitress said, "Well, somebody's chipper this morning." All I managed was a shrug. I was still dazzled at the night behind me. I ate less than I usually did and left, skipping down to the market to buy a dress for the following date. Once I arrived at the market, I noticed the man dragging Tom's body across the street. I went and followed him. As soon as I turned the corner, I saw the man trying to throw his body into the sea. I yelled, "What are you doing to Tom?" The man turned around and said, "What are you gonna do about it?" Then out of nowhere a gun was fired and the man fell into the sea. I turned around to see Regulus putting his revolver back in his holster. Amazed at what just happened, I ran and said, "Thank you, good Sir Regulus." Then Regulus went over and grabbed Tom by the arm, pulled him up and said, "Tom, are you okay?" "A lot better now, thanks to you," Tom replied with sarcastic gratitude. Then I asked Regulus, "Why were you just coming around while this was happening?" He replied, "I was following you, Vanessa." I believed his story and I went back to the market to get my dress. I eventually found one with a ton silk and ends rounded with diamonds. I purchased it and skipped home. I proudly showed the dress to my parents, who were appalled at my dress. I then went up to my room and tried it on. I then put it neatly into my closet, got ready for bed, and then finally fell asleep. Chapter 6: The Second Date. The next day Vanessa rose with her usual great day attitude. She hopped down to the diner for breakfast. On the way she skipped past an alley and heard a voice, a very familiar voice. She thought Regulus. What is he up to now? She looked back and saw the man and Regulus talking. If it wasn't for that dummy and your ventriloquist abilities, Vanessa would still be on to me. Well boss, we now have to make sure old Variku doesn't find out about our plans to get Thomas executed. But remember, we mustn't get England involved. We will carry out our plan and get him killed by the government. Vanessa told herself to remind Thomas about their plans. Then she finished her walk to the diner and had a nice meal and then skipped happily home. Once she reached her house, she skipped to her room and took a small nap. When she awoke, she went to her closet and put on her dress for the evening and shoes and went outside. There waiting for her was a horse-drawn wagon. Driven by Tom, he helped her into the wagon and they rode to a British cafe that served British foods. They sat at a table and said, "Vanessa, I believe that someone is watching us." Before she could answer, 20 or so armed men with bayonets came to our table. One said, "In the name of the President James Madison, you are under arrest for treason to these colonies." They both stood speechless from what was happening.